following is a GNC podcast production. Welcome to Geek Addicts, a pop culture podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Geek Addicts, the nostalgia podcast. We're a pop culture podcast. I already screwed it up. Anyways, I'm Bill. This is Matt. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. You know, it's legit. I think our intro is just going to be a running gag of how we can't figure out an intro at this point.
Maybe one of these days I'll take a crack at it.
Yeah, honestly, just like completely just like throw me for a loop and be like, just bang one out perfectly, and then I'll just be like, all right, that's it.
All right, that's Matt's job from now on.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, it's been a week for sure.
Yeah, it's been a long one. It was my first full week after the vacation, so it's just been it's been a slog.
Yeah, this week was really weird. It was like at points it felt like super like quick, but then other points it was just so slow. Like today I was like falling asleep in my chair because I was so tired.
Well, that's been happening to me a lot this week because I think I mentioned it last week, but Frances is getting her molars in, so her sleep schedule is all fucked up. Mm-hmm. So the other night, like she was super tired. She passed out at like 6:30, 6:45-ish, and then she woke up at 9, and then I was up until like 5:30 midnight with her. I had to get up like 5 hours later for work. I was not happy.
Yeah. I woke up this morning and I legit like looked at my my phone and my alarm was going off and I just like stared at it for like 10 minutes and was just like, shit, I just wasted 10 minutes.
I have that battle all the time. You just sit there just looking at it like, how badly do I need the money?
Yeah. It's like, do I need to get up? And then you like think of it and you're like, yeah, I need to get up.
Yeah.
Yeah, other than that though, I've been doing so many podcasts lately. Like I swear I haven't had time to do anything else.
I know, man. You've been on fire lately.
I've recorded about 6 podcasts in the last like 7 days.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's just like
because you got your three podcasts that you're doing weekly, but then you also I feel like you have a new guest appearance every week. Like
so guest appearances, I swear, they kind of come in cycles. Like I'll go like a good like couple of months without doing one, and then like I'll suddenly get like 4 in a row, and I'll be like, all right, I got a plan. Yeah, it's a struggle, but hey, it's fun and it's nice meeting new people, talking, getting into basically just kind of like socializing because it's so hard to do that nowadays.
Yeah, it's just so hard to find the time, and then you got to go through the whole process of like, finding people you have things in common with, and that whole. I mean, how long did it take us to actually hang out after we met? Like, we worked together.
Yeah, it was a couple of years, mostly because I was working nights at the time, but yeah, and then COVID happened. That was the other big thing.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody at that place gave a shit about masks
until they did slightly, and then it got weird.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but enough on that nonsense. God,
so RPGs.
Yeah, we've been so we originally were planning on doing another Pokemon Adventures retrospective, but as I said earlier, I haven't had any time to legit do anything, and that's a manga that I really like to read and like actually absorb everything that I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got like 5 volumes in, and I was like making decent progress, but I'm like, I'm just not gonna have time to finish this, so we're gonna push it off till next week.
Mm.
And instead, we had the idea to talk about some of our favorite RPGs that we've had over the years, because it's not a big secret we're pretty big RPG guys.
Yeah, for the most part, that's one of the main things that I play.
Yeah, I mean they're just like the best like games for like when you don't have a lot of time, or well, when you have like limited time and you want to kind of like you can't like dedicate all of your effort into like an action game or something. So like it's a nice like sit back and just kind of read some text and play with some menus kind of game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also depends on what kind of RPG you want to mess with, because I mean, some of my favorites are action RPGs.
Yeah, that's true. Like some of them you got to be a bit more attentive to. I personally prefer like a turn-based RPG over an action RPG, but both are both have their strengths.
I go through phases between the two. I don't have any one particular that I tend to prefer over the other. It just depends on my mood.
Yeah. Like for me obviously like not a big secret. My favorite RPG is also my favorite game of all time and that's Persona 4 Golden.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a unique RPG because it combines traditional turn-based RPG gameplay with like life simulation and like time management stuff, which to me makes it a very interesting and engaging RPG.
Yeah, I still need to play that. I have 2 copies of it. I have one for my Vita and one for the Switch, but I just haven't. Like I said before, I want to give that one the attention it deserves. And right now, I just have too many other things on my plate that wouldn't take nearly as much time to finish.
Yeah, no, I get that. Especially like I'm playing 4 Golden again right now, and the 3 remake just came out, and I'm like, I want to play that now too.
Oh, I went to my mom's house today and I picked up my PSP. I plugged it in, works perfectly. Like nothing ever happened.
Okay.
In fact, I think it might have still had a full charge from the last time I played it, which, if it wasn't a decade ago, it was damn close since the last time I played it, which is wild.
Yeah, it's weird because PSP batteries are kind of volatile compared to like the ones in DSs and like GBAs and stuff.
And you know the crazy thing is, I'm pretty sure I have like one of the first wave PSPs.
I had one of those.
Mine like one of the original ones.
Mine's unfortunately not functioning anymore. It's just it went through too much hell. I actually I imported a Japanese one that's like one of the later model ones, and it works like perfectly, and it's hilarious because the PSP isn't region locked at all, so it just works perfectly fine.
There you go. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's one of the older ones because I had been trying to figure out how to make internet work on mine forever. And after like years of trying, like going through phases of trying to figure it out, I think I came to the conclusion that it's not compatible with any Wi-Fi that's currently used. So yeah, it's an old one, but it still works great. I have this like bulky plastic case, like carrying case that I've had since I pretty much got it, and I don't know, maybe having it in that helped to keep it in good shape.
Yeah, honestly, like I think it's mostly like if the batteries are like exposed to like harsh environments, which I think is more common down in like warmer tempered areas.
Well, it was in like a basement storeroom at my mom's house, so it was nice and cool in there. So cool and dry.
Yeah, it's funny how the PSP is like that sometimes. The PSP, speaking of RPGs, the PSP is literally like the RPG machine in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you if there was any games in particular that you'd recommend for it, because I was looking around at eBay and a lot of games for PSP are still pretty cheap.
There's a good few. Unfortunately, a lot of the RPGs that I play are very expensive these days. But like, I think you've downloaded on your Vita, but like the PSP port of Final Fantasy IV in particular is like one of the best ports of that game available.
I think I have Final Fantasy 1 through 7 and Tactics and Tactics 2 all on my Vita. So those ones aren't necessary because I already have them all on that.
Yeah, then the load times are like miles better on the Vita than they are on the PSP.
I can imagine.
There's a few like the Yeast series it's spelled like YS. Those games are really fun. They're kind of expensive now though, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
The Persona games obviously on there, the Tales games, a whole bunch of like crazy RPGs. I'd have to break out my collection to actually let me boot up Game Eye.
Yeah, I was just curious because I don't know. I pretty much have had the same PSP games for like I have like 6 or 7 PSP games. And, I do need to get what's it Tenkaichi Tag Team because it's the
Mm.
only Dragon Ball game for PSP that I don't already have. So definitely gonna have to
So
get that one.
so there's the Legend of Heroes games. Those are really fun. John Dark's a really cool one. That's like a tactical RPG that's like based off of like I think it's like based off the like Joan of Arc in a way, which is
Mhm.
interesting.
Hmm.
There's Wild Arms XF, Star Ocean had two games on PSP. There was a really awesome Castlevania, Valkyrie Profile, a whole bunch of like really sweet games.
Hmm. I'll have to look through. I was like kind of just skimming through like the list of PSP games earlier, just kind of get an idea of what there was.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, PSP is a fun one. Honestly, like I feel like most of the great games on it got completely overlooked during its time, but now people are really starting to understand like what truly made that thing special.
mhm. um, so
So,
on the subject of RPGs, would you consider a tactics game to be an RPG?
so it depends on the game to me
Hmm.
because there are tactical RPGs, and then there are just straight up tactics games that don't have RPG elements.
Okay.
So, like, say, like a Fire Emblem to me, that is an RPG because it's
Hmm.
tactical, but it also has like RPG mechanics. But then, like, say a more strategy styled game, like say like Command and Conquer or I guess Age of Empires, I think is less RPG like.
Hmm.
So that's more straight up RTS.
Yeah. It's more like you get your troops, you assemble them how you want, but they don't like improve over time.
Yeah, but what's funny is those style of games can be RPGs because they do have ones like that that do have It's really the RPG elements that like kind of make it an RPG
Hmm.
because that's like the big reason why Zelda is not considered an RPG.
It's not considered an RPG.
It doesn't have RPG elements.
Oh, I guess that's
Like
true.
Link doesn't gain stats or levels, and it's
It's so
it's one of
weird.
those big debates because technically Zelda 2 is an RPG in a sense because Link does level up and gain stats.
It's just such an interesting like. It's weird how we kind of put games into boxes like that, and how some games that could be considered RPGs, but some not. But at the same time, it's like technically they're all role playing games because you're assuming the role of something that you're not.
That is always the fun argument to have with people. Because a friend of the show, Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover, he made the argument that one of the one of the greatest RPGs ever made is Gran Turismo. If you actually think about it, he's not wrong because
Yeah,
you basically you build up stats and like level up essentially and do races to gain money and experience and you're basically it's an RPG in a sense when you really think about it.
hmm, that's wild.
Yeah, one of those fun little like head scratchers that makes you think a little bit.
So you've talked about Persona 4 and Final Fantasy 8 to no end. What are some other RPGs that like?
So the big three that I think I am most commonly associated with on in the podcasting sphere are Persona 4 Golden, Final Fantasy 8, and then Tales of the Abyss.
Mhm.
Uh, Tales of the Abyss is part of the Tales series, and that game to me is for a long time it was my favorite game of all time until I discovered Persona 4.
Mhm.
And it is the thing about the Tales series is they're kind of cool. They're like imagine if an action RPG crossed with a turn-based RPG
Okay.
where it's you go around the world map and like you go through towns and stuff, kind of like a traditional turn-based RPG. But when you get out into like dungeons and stuff, you'll run into enemies. And rather going into a turn-based thing, you actually go into like an arena and you have like action combat, kind of almost Kingdom Hearts-ish in a way.
It sounds kind of similar to like Crisis Core
Kinda only instead of
with more like exploration.
so the difference in the Tales series is like when you go into battle, it actually has the battle transition into like a different screen, kind of like a regular RPG, but then like you're in
Mhm.
this like weird arena where you're controlling the characters action wise and the cool gimmick of the Tales series is you can play the multiplayer.
Okay.
So like in battle, you can have if you have multiple people, you can give player two a second controller and they can control the second party member during combat.
That's pretty cool.
It's a cool idea. They kind of dropped it with the newest one, which is kind of why the new one is a bit polarizing, but it's kind of fun. Like if say like you're just chilling at a friend's house and they're playing like Tales of Symphonia or something, you can just throw them the second controller and then they can get in on the action during combat.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, I've never played any of the Tales games, but I've heard so many people talk about them.
Yeah, they're worth giving a shot. Like I'd highly recommend picking up Vesperia, which is it's on pretty much everything at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly it's on Switch, so that's probably the easiest way to find it. But that's a really solid one to play. Symphonia is fine, although I wouldn't recommend the HD remaster because it's not the best port.
Okay.
I'm a huge supporter of Tales of the Abyss, obviously, but that one's a bit harder to find just because it's it's only been released on PS2 and 3DS.
Okay. Yeah, was there a physical version for a 3DS?
It was only released physically.
Okay, good.
Unfortunately, it's yeah.
A lot of stuff got locked behind a forever paywall.
So what's funny is you'd go on the 3DS store back in the day and you'd look up Tales of the Abyss and it would have a page, but the second you clicked on the page, it would say go to visit pick up at retail store.
Mm.
So you couldn't actually buy it on the digital store for whatever reason.
I gotcha.
Just an odd thing with some certain 3DS games back in the day.
Yeah. So, all right, that's cool. And then one of the general RPGs that I think both of us have had plenty of experience with is Pokemon.
Pokemon, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest, I want to say, are probably the big three at the moment.
I'd say so. Pokemon is actually the only like turn-based RPG I played as a kid.
Okay. I mean, that was most people's first RPG back in the day.
I think Pokemon Yellow was actually my first video game.
Oh, really?
As a whole, yeah. Because I got it for my 5th birthday with my Game Boy Color, which was also yellow. So that worked out.
So you had the yellow one. I had that weird turquoise blue green one.
I feel like the greenish one. I was thinking of the purple one, the like purple one.
So there was the blue one. There was like the lime green one, but then there was that one that was kind of like turquoise in between blue and green.
Okay,
that's the one that I had.
Huh.
The cool kids had the atomic purple one.
That was the one that I saw. Like all of I always saw the people with the purple ones.
Yeah, that was like the cool. You could the cool kid always had that one.
But yeah, I still have my copy of Pokemon Yellow, the same cartridge from all the way back then. The battery on it I don't think works anymore, so I can't save. But
most of
I still have it for sentimental reasons.
Yeah, you can replace those batteries, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. I just wouldn't know where to go, who to talk to for that.
Yeah. So you said Yellow is your first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you played probably the hell out of that game, right?
Oh yeah, so many times.
Yellow's an interesting one because that even back in the day, like it must have been really cool to play it and like have it like basically follow the anime in a sense.
Mm-hmm. I think it was the only game with Jesse and James in it up until like what? The remake on Switch, right? Let's Go.
Which was kind of crazy to see them because I felt like Nintendo was never going to bring them up again.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because they were basically, I think they're phased out of the anime now too at this point.
Are they?
Well, the anime ended kind of.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, there are still animes going. It's just not Ash anymore.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, at this point, because if they went the whole thing where like, it's gonna follow Ash's kid now, like Jesse and James would be like a little old at this point.
Is that confirmed? It's Ash's kid.
I don't know 100%, but I don't know. I watched a video or something about because they were trying to determine who Ash's kid's mom was.
Oh yeah, there's so many wild fan theories about that.
So I just assumed that there was something with his kid already.
No, I don't think that's been confirmed. I think it's because like the girl in the anime, the new one, has like that little green thing that looks like his hat logo.
Yeah, well, that could easily just be them being like, oh, we'll just give him something that kind of reminds you of Ash to have that transition work a little bit better.
It's totally gonna be like straight up just like not Ash's kid at all, and like people, all these fan theories are gonna be completely for nothing. But it
Watch,
is
it's actually going to be Gary's kid.
that would be an interesting twist.
I would watch a show that followed Gary's kids. That'd be awesome.
Gary fucking Oak driving a car at 10, surrounded by bitches.
Yeah, right. He's got a whole fan club.
That was such a
wild.
weird aspect of that show. Like they the ages they screwed that up so hard at the start, and we just never made sense after.
Yeah, well, there's a lot about, especially about the dub, that just made no sense.
Yeah.
um,
So Pokemon did. I'm assuming you went from Pokemon to Pokemon like most kids at the time.
oh yeah, I had Pokemon Yellow first, and I think I've had each of the original like Gen 1 games at one point or another. I have a copy of Red now. I remember getting a copy of Blue when I was a kid for like my birthday or Christmas or something. I have no idea what happened to that though. And then later on, I got a copy of well, I got Gold first, and then I got Crystal later. And then I just kept working up. I think Gen 4 was where I fell off. I think Heart Gold was the last one I played for like a while until I picked Pokemon back up as an adult.
Yeah, I swear every Pokemon fan went through that like period of time, like where they just kind of stopped playing Pokemon for a while. Because for me, it was after Diamond. Like I did pretty much everything in Diamond, and then I just lost interest for a couple of years, and then I saw Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and I was like, those look awesome. I need to play them.
That's kind of how it was for me too, because like I had played. I think Platinum was the last one I had played, and then when I heard that they were remaking the second generation games, I was like super excited because I loved second gen. You know, I like Yellow is the one that I, you know, was like the start, but like Gold is the one I really played the shit out of.
Yeah, like for me, it was Emerald. Like Gen 3 was my personal favorite. So when I saw the Gen 3 remakes years later, like I lost my shit because it was like the greatest thing ever.
I was really excited about that too because I love Groudon. Groudon's one of my favorite legendaries.
Yeah, Gen 3 too, I think was arguably the most. It got too much hate back in there. I think it has some of the more interesting world building in it.
Oh yeah, well that was the first one that had like, I mean they all had stories, but the third generation was the first one that had, I feel like, an engaging story, I guess.
2 had a story to a degree. I think the 8-bit graphics made it harder to follow it because Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I think, has one of the better stories just in terms of like how it's written.
I don't know. I feel like Neo Team Rocket or whatever you want to call it just didn't have the same impact because it's just like they have the whole like it like culminates in them trying to take over the radio tower to like try and get in touch with Giovanni, and you beat them, and then that's it. It's like there wasn't any like big, like, I don't know. It just, I felt like the scope of the Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald stories were just way more engaging and intense. Like the world was ready to fucking end in those games. Like,
yeah, I mean, I still to this day say that Black and White has the best story in the series, but you
that's
still
that's still
haven't
the only
played
one I
those.
haven't played. Yeah.
You're missing out, man. The Black and White like it's different. That's all
I'm gonna get to it. It's on that little DS chip I have, so I know I'll end up getting to it at some point. I'm on my cooldown period from Pokemon, if that makes sense.
I've been on that for years.
So I'm giving it some time before I go back into a Pokemon game.
Gotcha. So I guess going over to Dragon Quest, because you've been on a kind of like a Dragon Quest binge for a while now.
Yeah, I'm taking a little bit of a break right now, but yeah, I kind of like hammered through the first 5 games. I finished the 5th game just before the end of the year. So
what got you interested in Dragon Quest? I guess besides the Toriyama art.
I mean, that was kind of the biggest draw for me was because I've been kind of on like a little personal quest trying to absorb everything that Toriyama's done. So, Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger were going to be on that list, which I still need to get into that. I have it on my Vita. I haven't started playing it yet, but.
Oh, Chrono Trigger?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger is so worth it. It is.
It's one of those ones I always hear about. And you know what? I think when we had our, I don't even remember what episode it was, but I know at one point we were talking about Dragon Quest, and I said the whole thing about like the guy from Zelda. I think I might have been thinking of Chrono Trigger when I said that.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger is really good. Dragon Quest is really good. I mean, I still think like Dragon Quest 4 is like my personal favorite in that series. Honestly, one of my favorite RPGs of all time.
Yeah, 5 is the one that I feel like people talk about the most out of like the older games. But I definitely get what you're saying because I liked 4 a lot. I liked the way that story played out, how kind of like it followed different characters for like the first half of the game, and then like later on they all kind of congregate. Like you don't even play as your character until like 20 hours into the game.
Yeah, like you play as him briefly in chapter 1, and then he doesn't come back to like chapter 6, I think.
Yeah, it's like way down the line.
Because each chapter you go through a different party member. Like you go through I forgot the names. The night guy. Yeah,
it's like the two. They weren't gypsy girls, were they?
Oh,
something like that.
Mina and
the sisters.
Mila, I think their names are. I love them. They're fun.
And then there was the merchant guy.
Oh, Tornico. Everyone loves Tornico.
Mm.
Just because he's a joke character, but he like, I love his quest because like literally you spend half of it just running a store.
I know it's I like that was one of my favorite parts of that game was just doing that kind of goofy shit.
So what do you think of Dragon Quest and all of its puns?
Oh, I love dad jokes, so I'm all about the puns.
There's one thing about Dragon Quest series that never dies, and it's all the puns.
Yeah, especially with the slimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love this. The slime is literally like the most iconic, like video game character. One of the most iconic video game characters in general.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's freaking but I don't know. Dragon Quest 3 was really good too. I like that one a lot, especially like the twist at the end. Like that. I was not expecting that at all, and I loved it.
I think 3, 4, and 5 are considered like the best of the classic ones.
Mm-hmm. I definitely see that. 2, not so much.
Yeah, the first 2 are a bit iffy. 3 onward though, it's when the series really found itself. Later ones like 8 is very popular, and then 11 in particular is a joy to play.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first game. The second game I got hung up on because that one's just hard for no reason.
Yeah,
that one's just way harder than all the other ones.
The first game's just kind of dated and archaic. That's kind of its biggest downside.
And there's no parties; it's just you, which I mean, in a way, kind of is a good thing, but also it makes it kind of boring and repetitive.
Well, it was the first traditional console RPG in a lot of ways, so it kind of like you can tell they were really learning.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it wasn't until because Square later kind of copied them in their own style with like the Final Fantasy games, which Dragon Quest has always been kind of cool because it's always kind of stuck to its roots and like never really gone crazy. Mm-hmm. Final Fantasy has had an identity crisis for years at this point.
Yeah, no kidding. Even with the limited amount of games I've played, I could tell that.
Yeah, because you've been playing them. You started playing them in order, right? Recently.
Kind of. So, well, I started with 7, and then I jumped straight into 8, which was really, like we were saying off the air earlier. Like it was definitely a culture shock kind of thing where you going from very different games. And then after I finished 8, I ended up circling back around and playing the first game. I'm still technically a good way through the second game right now, but I put it down for a bit. I've got to get back to it.
Didn't you say you actually kind of like the second game's weird design choices?
Yeah, with like the way that like leveling up and stuff works. Like I think it's really interesting. I'm still not 100% sure how it quantifies like um when you actually get boosts on your proficiency or whatever it is, but because sometimes like you'll fight like a lot and it won't go up at all, but then you'll have one battle and all of a sudden it goes up a level. But
Yeah, it was an interesting idea. I get why it's polar. It's funny how like the most polarizing Final Fantasies are always the ones that mess with the combat system.
mm-hmm.
I mean, even 3 is pretty bizarre because 3 was the first one that introduced like the job class system,
Mm-hmm.
which was further refined in 5.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
4 kind of
really, okay.
4 takes kind of a step back for a more traditional storyline.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 also introduced the active time battle system, which is still probably my favorite RPG battle system of all time.
What like how 7 and 8 are, where it's like
8 to a degree. 8's a little weird because of the junction system. Definitely 7 though.
mm-hmm. I gotcha.
Like the whole like if you leave your cursor, like if you're not going through menus and you're not paying attention, the enemies will just kind of keep attacking you.
Yeah.
That's my favorite system because like the whole gimmick is like you have to constantly be watching and like because if you don't, you'll just keep getting attacked and you can't just like wait unless you have it set for wait mode. But wait mode's no fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward because 4 and 6 are the ones I tend to hear about a lot, aside from obviously 7. But so I'm looking forward to getting to those ones too.
So you've played 7 now. You're gonna notice a lot of similarities when you play 6 because 7 borrowed a lot from 6, even though it doesn't 6 doesn't get the credit that it deserves a lot of the time.
Yeah, because that one's one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's in my top 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like my top Final Fantasies are a little skewed because 8 is my favorite, but I don't think 8's the best Final Fantasy. If that makes any sense.
No, I get that. Trust me.
Like in terms of like nostalgia, 8's my favorite, but I'd say in terms of gameplay, it's like it's a very strong battle between 6 and 9 for like the best Final Fantasy overall.
Mm.
With 4 coming very close as well, because I think 4 has arguably the best story in a Final Fantasy game.
Okay.
So there's a lot to love about that whole era. Like the SNES and PlayStation eras are probably 2 of my favorites of all time.
All right.
Everything after that is a little harder to just to kind of pin down because I like 10 a fair amount, and I like 10 to a degree as well, especially its battle system.
Mm.
Everything after that though, it's kind of all over the place.
Does the battle system change that much between the two?
So 10-2 uses a heavily enhanced like version of the active time system, which is really awesome.
Okay.
10, the original 10 used this like new system that was like kind of like a turn-based thing. It's a good system. It's different though compared to the active system.
All right. Well, I guess I'll see when I get to it. I'll get there eventually, but going between Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, I'm trying to go through all of the mainline games for both series, and that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, aside from you're gonna have to skip 11 and 14 for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. And well, I don't know if this is actually happening, but I heard something about a possible offline version of Dragon Quest X coming out.
That's been rumored. I'm cautiously optimistic because I really want to play. I really want to play Dragon Quest X because I've heard it's really fucking good.
Yeah, because that would be awesome. Because I would definitely hate to have that hole in my experience. So
yeah, which is sad, but someday, hopefully.
The thing about MMOs, though, I mean, I don't necessarily have to skip the Final Fantasy ones because I think those, at least I know for a fact, 14 is still active.
14 is, I mean, 11's kind of still active, but like you have to pay for it to play it, and I'm like,
oh really? Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to do that. If I was
You have
willing
to.
to do that, I would have started playing World of Warcraft forever ago.
I mean, I've made my. I've basically said at this point that the only MMO I will ever play is RuneScape because it's the only one I just don't want to do that ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Because
It's just a big commitment. And
it's a
if I'm
massive time
hesitant,
sink.
yeah, and if I'm hesitant to start Persona 4 because of the time dump, like a game that I already own and have paid for and could just
Ha-
play whenever,
and
like
has an ending.
yeah, like yeah, if I'm feeling weird about that. Plus, I just like single player RPGs.
Mm.
You know, they're simple. It's something you could just throw on. You immerse yourself into a different story, and there's all sorts of different kinds. You know, they're not necessarily just going to be straight up fantasy games either. Like, although that is what I generally tend to prefer.
Yeah, I like fantasy to a degree. I've kind of grown accustomed now though towards like the more modern style
Mhm.
RPGs. I think playing a lot of Persona has done that to me.
Understandable.
One of my favorite RPGs that doesn't get enough love at all, that's kind of forgotten, is Lunar 2.
I haven't played that one.
Lunar 2 was a very obscure RPG. It originally came out on the Sega CD way back in like the 90s, and no one really bought it because it came out very late on the Sega CD and it kind of got overshadowed by the Sega CD dying.
Mhm.
And then they remade both Lunar 1 and 2 for PlayStation like years down the line, and Lunar 2 came out on the PlayStation right at the end of the PlayStation's life cycle, and it also kind of got ignored.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Lunar 1 has been remade like 5 times at this point.
No cheese.
And it's sad because Lunar 1's a great game, but Lunar 2 is just special.
Mhm.
Like it, I think it's the better of the two. And unfortunately, there's no cheap way to play it because it's never been re-released, and both versions of it are like like almost $200 plus games.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yep. That's the sucky part about a lot of RPGs these days.
Yeah. Um. So, just to talk a little bit about like action RPGs. One of the ones like the one that like really ignited me wanting to play these big open world games is Skyrim.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you had at least a small stint with it.
I've tried it. My problem with Skyrim is I don't like the first person perspective very much. And I know you can switch it to third, but
It's an awkward third
it
person.
doesn't it's a third person game that plays like a first person. It just not a fan.
Yeah. It's a clunky game, but it was the first one that really like showed me that the kind of scope that you could have in these kinds of open world games. Like it would take you like an hour to walk from one side of the map to the other, and and that's if you're sprinting the whole time. Like it
Yeah,
was so big.
it's a cool idea and I like the world setting. I just like I've never found those like stories very interesting and engaging, which I hear from a lot of people like they stay as far away from the story as possible when they're playing those games a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Um I own Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim like on various systems. One of these days I'm going to sit down and play them.
The only one I've actually played is Skyrim, but what I think is a far more interesting and um, like immersive experience is with The Witcher 3.
I've heard that one is really good. I
That
just
one's it's so solid that third person issue that you have with Skyrim, it's not a thing in The Witcher 3. It's very clearly designed to be a third person game. It plays smoothly. It looks pretty. And it's one of those games where like yeah, you do tend, I mean, you can focus on the main story. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, and it's not a bad thing because the main story is really good and engaging. But the side quests are also really interesting because it's like these little bite-sized stories, and like it's like there's a story and a lore to each of the side quests, and it's you could literally jump into the game, just do like a side quest for like half hour, 45 minutes, and like by the time you're done with it, feel satisfied, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a cool idea. Like I've heard nothing but good things about The Witcher. I think the thing with me is it's like with a lot of Western style RPGs, I see the size of them and I'm always like, I just don't have the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also play Persona 4 once a year.
See, the difference is though, Persona 4 like is very like straightforward. Like if once you get into it,
That's fair.
those games like I always get overwhelmed because there's just so much to do.
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects to it, but I mean, at least like the like equipment is easy enough to manage because yeah, you're pretty much like yeah, you can use the stuff you find, but usually the stuff you find you're just gonna sell or break down to make new stuff because like the stuff that you can make ends up being um, a lot more higher level than the stuff you find. Um, and then like the magic system's kind of weird. It is like simple, but complicated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's a straightforward magic system where it's just like you set a spell, you have the one button that uses the spell, but there's 5 different spells essentially, but there are different tiers to each spell and different variations of each spell. So each of those 5 spells is really like 20 spells wrapped in one, just
Mm.
depending on what you have equipped.
Nah,
Um,
I get you. Uh, Speaking of Western style RPGs, like one of the ones that I think I've I've always been more of a Japanese RPG guy, but Western
mhm.
ones there's a few here and there that I've gotten into. One that I particularly have gotten an attachment to is the Mass Effect series.
That's one I hear so much about. My buddy Matt is constantly telling me to play it because he says that me and Cindy should play it because we like Star Trek so much.
Honestly, they are literally space opera the video game.
It sounds really cool, and like he's told me like little bits about the games and stuff, and I think he plays it on his laptop too. But it's one of
I
those
mean,
ones that I definitely am gonna have to get into at some point.
you've got the PS5, so like legendary collection is like for PS4 is like right there, and it's definitely the best way to play them now because it has all 3 games with all the DLC included.
Okay, how much does that usually run?
Um, that's a good question. I can let's consult eBay at this point. Because it's a couple of years old now, so it's not a Nintendo game, so it's not like it holds its value entirely.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Mass Effect Legendary Edition PS4. Um, oh, brand new on eBay at $15.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
Um,
definitely worth it.
13 for pre-owned, 14 for new. Yeah,
Yeah, might as well just get it new.
it's gone down. Let me check Amazon too, just for an alternative.
um,
Mass Effect Legendary Edition PS4.
that's definitely on my list, but
So it's a bit more expensive on Amazon. It's like 22, but I mean that's still not that bad.
yeah, that's pretty much just paying for it to get there faster.
Yeah. So yeah,
Um,
that one though is like it's literally like it takes like all the tropes from different sci-fi like related series. Like there's a lot of Babylon 5 in there, some Star Trek, some Star Wars, like
mhm.
any like big sci-fi, and it kind of just conglomerates them all into this like amazing space opera RPG that spans 3 games and like this epic story.
Mhm. What kind of gameplay is it?
Third person shooter for the most part. The third
Mm,
game in particular, especially is third person shooter.
okay.
Um, but there's a lot of customization you can do. There's a lot of exploration on planets, especially in the first game. And a lot of it is like just kind of exploring around the game's world, like talking to different characters. And like, there's a lot of like dialogue text trees and stuff where you can like, the story will change depending on your choices.
Oh, that's fun. I love games like that.
Oh, yeah. I honestly, you'll probably love Mass Effect.
Mm. Yeah, because The Witcher does a lot of that kind of thing too. I think there's like I looked it up once. I think there's like 80 something different possible endings of The Witcher 3. Like
Yeah.
that's how much like your decisions and conversations and stuff matter.
There's another Western RPG. It's very obscure at this point, and it's kind of been forgotten because it kind of bombed when it came out, even though it was a really cool game. This was back on like PS3 360 days. It was called Alpha Protocol, and it was made by Obsidian Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And like Obsidian makes a ton of really awesome games overall, but this game was interesting because it was kind of Mass Effect like. It was like a somewhat sci-fi action RPG kind of game.
Yeah.
What made it really cool though was like your choices literally affected everything in the game. Like you could kill some random NPC early in the game, and that'll like completely change the entire scope of the story because it like changes like if that character is significant in any plot lines, completely changes everything from there on in. It was just a really cool like game where like your choices truly mattered.
That's pretty cool.
Only downside is it was a very clunky, kind of not glitchy, not quite functioning all the time game, but it had such a great idea and scope to it.
That's pretty cool.
Did you ever play the South Park RPGs?
Stick of Truth?
Stick of Truth, Fractured Butthole?
I have played through all of Stick of Truth. I started Fractured Butthole, but I did never finished it.
What'd you think of those ones?
I thought Stick of Truth was great. I fucking loved that game. I even got Cindy playing it too, but I think she's stuck at a part and she just got distracted because now she's on Hogwarts Legacy and she's been playing the shit out of that.
Gotcha.
So, until she finishes that, or at least is satisfied with it, because I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up starting it over.
Yeah.
But until she's satisfied with that, that's probably gonna stay where it is. But yeah, it was such a fun game.
Well, you're basically just playing an episode of South Park.
For real, like and it's wild the way that it's set up too, because it looks just like the show. And
oh yeah,
like the way like you explore around the town. And that's the crazy thing is it's not even like a big map or anything, but it's just the way that it's laid out and how you have like the little different, like I guess you'd call them dungeons,
yeah,
where like you can go to like the Tower of Peace, or Cartman's backyard where there's this whole like crazy thing set up. And then there's like 8-bit Canada or 16-bit Canada.
Canada just goes 8-bit.
It's when I first got to Canada, I thought that was the greatest fucking thing in the world. Like, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, Stick of Truth was so good. So you didn't finish Fractured Butthole. Did you just not like it, or?
No, it wasn't that I didn't like it. Well, I mean, I did enjoy the aesthetic of the first one because, I mean, obviously, like as I mentioned earlier, I generally veer towards fantasy games.
Yep.
And I intend to go back and finish it. I think at that point I was just burnt out because I literally went straight from the first game to the second game.
Okay, that makes sense. See, for me, I'm kind of in the minority. I prefer Fractured Butthole over Stick of Truth.
Mm.
I think it's because I prefer the superhero aesthetic over the fantasy one, like the LARPing setting. Then I like the tactical style of the combat compared to the turn-based was really good in Stick of Truth. I just kind of like the more expansive style they added for Fractured Butthole.
That's understandable. I mean, I always like a game that changes it up, But yeah, I mean, the games are friggin' hilarious. Like,
oh yeah,
like even just going around, like walking into random houses, knocking on random doors, like some of the weird shit you would see.
The guy fucking the horse is still the most what the fuck moment in the game.
For real. And there's the boss battle where you fight against the underpants gnomes. And you're literally fighting like under the bed while your parents are doing it on the bed.
Yeah, and there's a certain phallic object that appears at one point that makes the game very hard to stream at times.
No kidding. And even just like going through like, looting people's houses and shit. You go into Cartman's mom's room.
Oh yeah.
And there's just like a bunch of drugs. Like every drawer you look into has like 3 different dildos in it. Like there's like a zebra striped one and shit. Like there's all sorts of crazy shit.
There's a shitting mini game in Fractured Butthole.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, every toilet you have to play the shit mini game. It's like the dumbest thing ever.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so many they reference so many episodes of the show too, and like the writing is top notch because I guess Matt and Trey were very involved because they did not want the N64 games to ever happen again.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember playing that way back. Because my uncle Chris had that. I don't remember if it was for PlayStation or for N64. Did it come out for PlayStation?
Yeah, the PlayStation version is like 5 times worse.
Oh, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
The N64 version's just kind of bad. The PlayStation version's like downright awful.
that's fair. But yeah, it's just it was such a love letter to the series. And they're making a new one too, aren't they?
Yeah, there's like this.
But it's a different style.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I'm still gonna play it, but I have to wait and see on it.
Like Snow Day or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen that. I just don't know what it is yet.
I guess
haven't seen enough.
Oh, off topic. Did you see the Spy Family trailer? The movie.
Oh, for Code White, yeah.
Yeah, I watched that last night. I'm super hyped for it.
That the Spy Anya game's coming out too pretty soon. I've seen more trailers of that.
Oh really? Is it like soon?
Within the year, I think. I mean, it looks interesting.
What kind of game is it supposed to be?
I don't know yet. It's kind of unclear.
Because I tried looking, like when I first heard about the game, I tried looking up like what like the gameplay would be like, and I wasn't getting any clear answers.
Yeah, I have to wait and see on it. It looks cool though. The graphics are really spot on. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, either way, I'll probably give it a shot. Unless it ends up just being like a Sims thing, in which case, I mean, I'd have to see like actual footage of the game before I could make a decision if it's like Sims like. Because I know you have your memories of Sims, but I never really cared for the series.
You weren't like me and Alex, just killing Sims for no reason.
I think I just didn't understand The Sims, and it just never really appealed to me. I think that's why I didn't like Minecraft either. It's because it just reminded me so much of The Sims.
Minecraft is literally just a sandbox to me.
Yeah.
Which I enjoy because I just like building shit, but...
Well, maybe it sounds a little hypocritical to say, but I do want to try Dragon Quest Builders at some point.
Well, that's just Minecraft with an actual direction, from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm. And Dragon Quest characters, which
yeah, and they're actually pretty good, from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think other RPGs. We've covered a bit of the basis here. You mentioned tactical RPGs earlier. Like, do you have any in particular that you were pretty big into, or?
There was only one that I played when I was younger. I actually, even to this day, I've only played 2 tactics games. One of them being Yu Yu Hakusho, but that wasn't until I was an adult. But the one I played as a kid was Lord of the Rings Tactics on the PSP.
Okay.
Which was a really solid game. It went through the entire events of Lord of the Rings from the very beginning all the way through to the end. And you have, and the cool thing is you could play as either the good guys or the bad guys when you start a new game. So, I mean, that's a really fun aspect of it. And I think you get 5 characters that level up and grow as you go along for each side. And like, you'll get like other, units or whatever. There'll be some generic people that you can control. And there's also some named people from the movies. But they don't like level up or anything. But I don't know, like, I definitely would call that one an RPG just because like there was like actual like progression. And I don't know if there was I think there was a level system in that. I have it, like I said, I literally just dug out my PSP. I will be playing it again very soon, but at the moment it's just so distant in my mind that I don't remember a ton of details about it. But I'm fairly certain it definitely had RPG elements to it.
Yeah, I always loved how, like, looking back on it, like some RPG, so like particularly with like anime based games, you'd always either get, say, like they always seem to stick to 2 genres. It was either fighting games or RPGs. Because like Dragon Quest had their fair share of, I mean, not Dragon Quest, Dragon Ball had its fair share of like mostly fighters, but it also had those weird card to RPGs. Like for the longest time. And then of course like Attack of the Saiyans later on, which is still, I really wish they made more of those.
Yeah, it's a hidden gem.
because even Inuyasha had those random like RPGs as well.
Mhm.
Like there's the one on PlayStation that never came out over here, the one on PS2 that's like not amazing but not bad either, and then there's the god awful DS game that's like over $100 now for some reason.
Jeez.
That is one of those games where it's like there's the way too many random encounters, like to the point where it makes the game just not fun to play.
That's rough. I mean,
Like I got to level 30 before I even got to the first dungeon.
really?
There was that many random encounters.
Yikes. Yeah, that could
Yeah.
definitely ruin a game.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually an interesting topic of debate that we were having on a server way back. But what are your thoughts, like random encounters versus like on-screen encounters?
Um, I mean, I guess it depends on how it's laid out. The way it works in Pokemon, I like that where it's like specifically tall grass, unless you're in a cave, which caves are so fucking annoying in Pokemon.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole like concept of like if the encounters only happen in tall grass, like because there's always ways to, like you can't necessarily always go around, but there's always a shorter path, like the least amount of grass spaces to walk through as opposed to going another route. So like there's ways around it, and then you can use like items and stuff to. So like the way they have it in Pokemon, I feel like is a less annoying way to do random encounters. But then you have one game that the random encounters really annoyed me on was Final Fantasy VIII because I was trying to avoid leveling up, and a lot of times I would get lost in that map, having no idea where to go. Like I don't know what it is, but going between 7 and 8, but I found myself getting lost a lot more often in 8 than I did in 7.
Probably eight's more detailed graphics were a bit harder to traverse than the somewhat simpler ones in 7.
Yeah, because I was also playing the remastered version of 8, so it was definitely there's definitely a big aesthetic change in general. Plus, the whole car thing threw me for a loop.
Yeah, the cars, they wouldn't make a comeback till 15.
Yeah, but I don't know. Honestly, it's hard to make a decision there.
I think for me, I prefer on-screen encounters for the most part, but I don't really hate random as long as they're well designed.
I guess it depends on how much you need to grind in the game. Because if it's a game where you need to grind a lot, then it's good to have random encounters. But I feel like you encounter a lot less when it's on-screen encounters.
True, although it depends on the game too, because in some cases they respawn.
Mm-hmm.
And other games are usually designed like well enough that you don't need to like grind. Hopefully,
yeah.
It's an interesting spark of debate that I had on another server a while back. Just kind of like it was kind of 50-50. Like most people prefer on screen, but there are some defenders of random encounters.
Mm-hmm.
I know in an action game, random encounters really don't work. Obviously,
right. See, that's the thing is like the on-screen encounters. I definitely associate that more with action RPGs. With the exception of like newer Pokemon games, which I mean I haven't really played much of those, but
yeah, they're hit or miss in a lot of ways.
That's what I hear. I haven't played anything since. I mean, technically, Shining Pearl was the last like.
Oh, the remake.
Which I mean, that one's still random encounters. It's still like the old style, so that wouldn't really count. As far as mainline games, the last one I played was Sun.
Gotcha.
I didn't even finish that one, so.
I mean, I only got like 5 minutes into that one, so.
Yeah, but one RPG series that I played an outrageous amount of was the Fable series.
I've heard, and I'm currently playing 2. I have to get into it. I'm still very early in the game, but that's one that I see the appeal of, and I really want to get more into.
Yeah, it's a really fun aesthetic of it. Because the first game definitely leans real hard into like the classic fantasy setting. Um, and I'll just explain a little bit of the story of that one, just because, as much as I have a certain fondness for it, it's a really clunky game.
Yeah.
So I can't really, in good conscience, recommend it. But I mean, if you get into the series and you want to play the roots, it's not like it's unplayable. And there's a lot of things about the first game that I like a lot. But I mean, essentially, the main idea of the story is you're this kid in this backwater village, and your village gets raided by bandits. They kill your dad. As far as you know, your mother and your sister are also dead. Spoiler, later on you learn that they're not. But you end up getting taken in by this guy named Maze, who's like a high-ranking guy in the Heroes Guild, which is where they teach you to, use swords, bows and arrows, and magic. So you gotta go through your tutorial there. Then there's a time skip, and then once you're old enough and you graduate, then you become a full-fledged hero, and you literally just take on jobs like there's like job requests that people send in, and those are your quests. And the story goes on from there. But there was a lot of really fun ideas that were thrown in there that they didn't really continue on with the later games. In the second game, it definitely started leaning a little bit more steampunky. The third games, especially, because second and third games, it definitely feels more industrial era than the first game.
I kind of like that vibe. Like I like the steampunk industrial mix. Like because it still feels fantasy-ish, but it has kind of the modern sensibilities as well.
Yeah, because it's still got like the fantasy type monsters like the Hobbs and Balverines and stuff from the first game, and you can still use magic, but instead of bows and arrows, you have like flintlock rifles and pistols, and I think you can get a blunderbuss at one point too. So yeah. Like there's guns and stuff. It's like it feels very piratey, but with magic.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of kind of like elements like that in 2. What I find interesting about Western RPGs is they tend to be based more around like the world, and it's not so much the stories that are important. It's more like the world and world building around them, unlike a Japanese RPG where it's very character driven.
Well, that's the cool thing about like Fable. The thing I like about Fable, like the Fable series, is it doesn't necessarily take itself too seriously. Like a lot of the acting is very goofy. Goofy line deliveries and stuff. Like
there's like a fart command in one of the games.
Yeah, there's a fart command in all the games.
Okay.
And that's just like random shit that you can do, and like you can interact with people and stuff. But like the main story in 2, I think 2 is the strongest story. And honestly, I think it's just the best version of it, because 3 is good. I like 3. But it was kind of rushed going out, so there's some glitches in it that can kind of throw you in a wrong direction and piss you off at points. It's still a playable game. It's not like it's broken, but there are points where if you don't do things a certain way, then you won't be able to finish certain quests and stuff.
Yeah, just unfortunately, a lot of Western games have been suffering from that lately. Yeah, Fable's definitely one I'm interested in, especially that new one. That looks pretty interesting.
I'm so excited for that. Like, I'm fully ready to go out and fucking buy an Xbox Series X just for that game.
I can't get over it's the Forza teams making it, which is funny to me, but
yeah, I mean, if it works, it works. And I like what they're doing with it too, where they're going back to like the OG like fantasy roots, but it's taking place in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which when you play Fable 2, the way that happens will make a lot more sense, because part of the story of 2 will explain how the future is the past.
Yeah. Damn, I got to sit down and play more of that game when I have time.
It's such a fun game. You should honestly try to get Alex to come play it with you, because it's a couch co-op game. It's one of the best couch co-op games that I've ever played personally.
Yeah, that's the hard part is just getting Alex to sit down and play a game like that. I mean, we were working on a Diablo 3 playthrough a while back, and I want to finish it because like she was liking it. It's just very hard to get her to sit down and play a game like that.
Yeah, actually, Cindy and I just started a run of that game.
Diablo 3.
Yeah, because we've taken a couple of tries at it, but like I think um, the first time we were playing on Xbox, and then we ended up I don't remember what happened to it, but we ended up starting to play it on PS4, and then the PS4 broke, so we had to stop playing it on that. But now we have the PS5 again, and I still had the PS4 disc, so we started it up again. And,
Yeah. No, the Diablo series is fun just because it's like a hack and slash RPG, which is I enjoy because it's like action, but it's not like super deep action.
mm-hmm. See, the problem for me is like I like Diablo 3. I had a lot of fun playing it, but playing it for an extended period of time makes me real sleepy.
Yeah, I've noticed that it's a very mesmerizing kind of game.
Yeah, because it just like you kind of like zone into it, and then like I don't know, it just makes me so sleepy.
RPGs kind of do that in general sometimes.
That's part of the reason why I have to take breaks from Pokemon.
Yeah, Pokemon puts me to sleep a lot,
Especially Pokemon.
especially the new ones.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think anything else.
I mean, there's plenty of Dragon Ball RPGs we could talk about, but I think a lot of those are going to be saving for their own episodes.
Yeah, I think it's mostly a bit of an introduction because I mean you're really just kind of getting into them now, like opening the floodgates on them.
Yeah, no kidding. I definitely want to try some other ones. Like, obviously, Persona 4 is definitely going to happen at some point. It's just whenever I decide I'm ready for the commitment of it.
Yeah.
And then I definitely want to try at least one Tales game because it's one that I always hear about. Mass Effect is another one.
Fire Emblem, that's another big.
Yeah, my buddies have been on my ass to play Awakening forever now.
Awakening's good. I adore Three Houses. Like Three Houses is probably one of my favorite games of all time now.
What's that one on?
Switch.
That's the Switch one?
Right. That was the first Switch one that came out.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the one that has like the three characters like in like the triangle formation on the cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of RPGs that see the problem is with the 2-year-old, I just don't have the free time for like big sprawling. I mean, right now I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then I got the second one that's coming out real soon. So I don't know how soon I'm going to be buying it.
Yeah.
After it comes out, but I'm definitely going to want to play that like soon.
Plus, like you can get Final Fantasy 15 now, which is another action RPG in its own right.
Mm-hmm. So it's like right now.
I'm sorry, not a 15, 16. I meant.
Oh yeah, but yeah. So that's kind of like my priority at the moment because I kind of have to just stick with the one. Because then I'm also playing Legacy of Goku 2 for like my kind of like chill hang it back game. And then at my PSP again, I'm going to be playing Lord of the Rings Tactics and the Shin Budokai games again.
Yep.
There's just a bunch of other games that I'd like to get into too.
Yeah, that's the sad part about being an RPG guy. It's just like you just don't have the time to play any of them.
They're just so long. Oh, and I'm also in the middle of a Final Fantasy 2 playthrough. So, yeah, I'm going to have to get back to that one at some point. Luckily, that's a shorter game. So, you know, I'm probably already more than halfway done with it. I don't remember where I left off.
Yeah.
I think I'm right around the point where I don't know if I did it yet or not, but I either going to destroy the Dreadnought or I just destroyed it.
Yep.
I don't remember which.
Yeah, that's the downside to being older is just like you can get all the RPGs you want, but you just have no time to play them.
Yeah. See,
wish I had them back in the day as a kid.
That sweet spot in your late teens, early 20s. That's the ideal time for RPGs.
No responsibilities all the time in the world.
Yeah. God, how many hours I pumped into Monster Hunters.
That's an RPG right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the never-ending RPG.
Yeah. Like legitimately.
Oh, there's another game I played because I messed around with some of the Sword Art Online games too a while back when I was like first really getting into the series. And there was one that came out for PS4 and Vita. It was Sword Art Online Lost Song,
Yep.
and that was based around the like fairy story arc in the game, which is probably why they consider it to be the worst story arc of the show. But the game is dope because it's like I don't know if open world is the right word for it, but it is there's 4 really big maps to explore, and because you're a fairy, you fly all over the map. So
Yeah.
like you have your dungeons built in, but then you're also flying around. There's flying enemies that you can encounter. There's like special missions you could do. It's very limited, but there is a create a character function, which is pretty fun. And it's the only SAO game that I've played that actually had a magic mechanic, which is cool.
Yeah, I have a couple of those in my PS4 collection. I've been meaning to get around to, just haven't had time.
Lost Song is the only one I've played that I really feel like it's worth putting time into. And I hate saying that because I put a shit ton of time into the first one, Hollow Fragment, which I believe was originally a PSP game. But I mean, I enjoyed it just because I was really into the series at the time. But if you're not really into the series, then you probably wouldn't care much for it.
Yeah, I think that's like the big thing.
I think Lost Song, out of the ones that I played, is the most accessible one, especially if you've already played those kinds of arena fighters with the flying element to it. Like if you played Xenoverse, you can play Lost Song.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, like talking about the whole flying around the world map, like that reminds me of like Kakarot, where like my favorite part of that game is just flying around as Goku.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that combat system is a bit like contentious depending on the person, but that is like the best game in terms of making it feel like you're actually playing as a Dragon Ball character.
Oh, for sure. Because you really feel the weight behind the punches too. Like it's I don't know, it's really fun. I loaded up before we did our Dragon Ball games episode. I loaded up Kakarot on my Switch, and I had totally forgotten where I was in that game. Like my guys are like almost maxed out.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I'm on like level 200 something. I'm like, holy shit! I didn't know that I got that far in there.
That game is just such like a love letter to like Dragon Ball fans. I'm super glad it came out as good as it did.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there's definitely ways they could improve it, but we'll see if they ever end up making a second one. Hopefully,
Yeah.
or even like a prequel with original Dragon Ball. Like I would be super into that. Like
That
just
would be awesome.
playing as like Goku, Krillin, Yamcha, Tien. Like that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd be 100% down for that. But yeah, so we've got about an hour 13. Feel like we've kind of covered all of our bases. Maybe we can revisit this one further, like sometime down in the future after we've probably played some more games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. And then next week, hopefully, though, I'll be able to actually we'll finally get Pokemon done because I should have enough time next week to actually read it because we're going into a long weekend pretty soon. So
Yeah, and you only have two more volumes left.
yeah, I was making decent progress. To be honest, the shock, the not so much shock. I will admit this: the changing from artists like mid like go from like chapter the second volume into the third volume was a bit jarring at first, but I gotta say I enjoy Yamamoto's art. So.
Yeah, well, I feel like he does a good job, kind of like emulating the original art style, but at the same time, kind of taking it his own way.
I'll save my opinions on some of his stylistic choices from when we do the episode, but that man's got some interesting design ideas.
Yeah.
we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so once again, guys, thanks for joining us on Geek Addicts. You can find Geek Addicts every week in the GNC podcast feed. You can find all of our links at linktree/the Barber Who Games. And if you'd like, you can join the GNC Podcast Network Discord server where we have all info on GNC, 3DO Experience, Geek Addicts. We can talk gaming, anime, just in general nonsense. We have a weird Kermit the Frog obsession, and Alex posts water bottle propaganda. It was a lovely time over there.
Yeah.
And with that, guys, we will see you all later.
Have a good one.